The history of the Knights Templar stands as one of the most captivating and controversial chapters in medieval history, a tale that weaves together religious devotion, military prowess, financial innovation, and ultimately dramatic destruction. From their humble beginnings as protectors of pilgrims to their rise as one of the most powerful institutions in Christendom, and finally to their shocking downfall amid accusations of heresy, the Templars have captured imaginations for over 9 centuries. Their story is not merely one of knights and battles, but a complex narrative that illuminates the very nature of medieval society, the intersection of faith and power, and the dangerous game of politics that could elevate an organization to unprecedented heights or crush it utterly. To understand the Knights Templar, we must first journey back to the late 11th century to a Europe transformed by religious fervor and military ambition. The year 1095 marked a turning point in Western history when Pope Urban II stood before a great assembly at Clermont in France and delivered a speech that would echo through the ages. The Byzantine Emperor Alexius I had sent desperate pleas for help against the Seljuk Turks who had conquered much of Anatolia, but Urban's response went far beyond mere military aid. He called for a holy war, a sacred expedition to reclaim Jerusalem and the Holy Land from Muslim control. The Pope's words ignited a fire that spread across Europe with remarkable speed. He spoke of the sufferings of Eastern Christians, of holy places defiled, and of the spiritual rewards awaiting those who took up the cross. Those who died in this endeavor, Urban promised, would receive immediate remission of sins and eternal salvation. The response was overwhelming. Nobles and commoners alike took the cross, sewing cloth crosses onto their garments as a sign of their vow. The First Crusade, as it came to be known, was a massive undertaking that brought together diverse elements of European society. Great lords like Godfrey of Bouillon, Raymond of Toulouse, and Bohemond of Taranto led armies across thousands of miles of hostile territory. The journey itself was an ordeal that claimed many lives through disease, starvation, and skirmishes with local populations. Yet against all odds, the Crusaders achieved what many had thought impossible. After a brutal siege lasting from June to July 1099, Jerusalem fell to the Christian forces. The Crusaders' entry into the city was marked by terrible slaughter, with Muslim and Jewish inhabitants killed indiscriminately in what contemporary chroniclers described with a mixture of triumph and horror. The capture of Jerusalem created a new political reality in the eastern Mediterranean. The Crusaders established a series of states along the Levantine coast, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Tripoli. These Crusader states, as they came to be known, were European colonial ventures in the heart of the Islamic world, constantly threatened by surrounding Muslim powers and dependent on a steady flow of reinforcements and supplies from Europe. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, the most prestigious of these states, attempted to recreate European feudal structures in an alien environment, with a king, noble vassals, and a complex system of laws and customs adapted to local conditions. However, the establishment of Christian rule in the Holy Land created new challenges that the Crusaders had not fully anticipated. Chief among these was the problem of pilgrimage. The liberation of Jerusalem had opened the holy sites to Christian pilgrims, and thousands made the arduous journey from Europe to pray at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and walk in the footsteps of Christ. Yet the roads between the coast and Jerusalem were dangerous, infested with bandits who preyed upon vulnerable travelers. Pilgrims, often traveling in small groups and carrying valuables to sustain their journey, were easy targets. The new Christian authorities, struggling to maintain control over their territories and defend against external threats, could spare few resources for protecting these religious travelers. It was in this context of danger and devotion that the Knights Templar were born. Around the year 1119, a French knight named Jacques de Molay, who had come to the Holy Land either as a crusader or a pilgrim, witnessed firsthand the perils facing Christian pilgrims. Moved by their plight and inspired by a revolutionary idea, Jacques gathered 8 companions who shared his vision. These 9 knights took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience similar to those taken by monks, but with a crucial difference. They also vowed to protect Christian pilgrims through force of arms. This combination of monastic spirituality and military purpose was unprecedented in Christian history. While the Church had long struggled with the concept of violence in service of faith, the Crusades had begun to legitimize the idea of holy war. The Templars took this concept to its logical conclusion, becoming warrior monks who saw fighting to protect Christians as a form of divine service. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem, recognizing the value of such a dedicated force, granted the knights quarters in the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount, which the Crusaders believed to be the site of Solomon's Temple. This location would give the order its name, the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, known more simply as the Knights Templar. The early years of the order were marked by genuine poverty and hardship. The seal of the Templars, showing two knights riding a single horse, symbolized their humble circumstances. They relied on donations and the goodwill of the faithful, spending their days patrolling the dangerous roads between Jaffa and Jerusalem, particularly the route through the Judean hills where pilgrims were most vulnerable. For nearly a decade, the Templars operated in relative obscurity, slowly building their reputation and refining their mission. Their dedication and effectiveness gradually attracted attention and support from both religious and secular authorities. The turning point came when Hugues de Molay travelled to Europe in 1127 to seek official recognition and support for his order. This journey would transform the Templars from a small band of dedicated knights into an international organization that would shape the course of medieval history. The Council of Troyes in 1129 marked the official birth of the Knights Templar as a recognized religious order. Hugues de Molay's mission to Europe had been remarkably successful, largely due to the support of one of the most influential figures in the Church, Bernard of Clairvaux. Bernard, a Cistercian abbot and later saint, was renowned for his eloquence, his mystical writings, and his enormous influence over both religious and secular leaders. When Bernard threw his support behind the Templars, doors opened throughout Christendom. The council, convened specifically to consider the Templars' petition, included papal legates, archbishops, bishops, and abbots, as well as secular nobles. Hugues presented his case, explaining the order's mission and its unique combination of monastic discipline and military purpose. Bernard of Clairvaux not only supported the Templars at the council, but also played a crucial role in developing their rule, the set of regulations that would govern every aspect of Templar life. Drawing heavily on the rule of Saint Benedict, which, governed traditional monastic orders, Bernard adapted these principles to fit the unique requirements of warrior monks. The Latin rule, as it came to be known, contained 72 clauses that covered everything from the election of the Grand Master to the daily prayers required of members, from dietary restrictions to the conduct expected in battle. The rule emphasized obedience, humility, and discipline, while still acknowledging the martial nature of the order's mission. Brothers were forbidden from hunting, except for lions, required to eat in silence while listening to holy readings, and strictly prohibited from any contact with women, including members of their own families. The papal recognition that followed the Council of Troyes, it really transformed the Templars' prospects dramatically. Pope Honorius II gave his official approval, and subsequent popes would shower the order with privileges. The Templars were granted the right to have their own priests, to build their own churches, and to be exempt from local ecclesiastical authority, answering only to the Pope himself. This independence from local bishops and secular rulers would prove to be both a source of strength and ultimately a cause of resentment and conflict. With official recognition came, an explosion of growth that transformed the Templars from a small brotherhood into an international organization. The 1130s and 1140s saw a remarkable expansion across Europe as nobles and knights, inspired by the Templars' mission and attracted by the promise of salvation through military service, flocked to join the order. The appeal was particularly strong among younger sons of noble families who, honestly, had little prospect of inheriting lands and titles. The Templars offered them purpose, prestige, and the possibility of adventure in the Holy Land. Donations poured in from all levels of society. Kings and great nobles granted vast estates, while common folk contributed what they could, believing that supporting the Templars was, a way to participate in the defense of Christendom. The organizational structure that emerged during this period of expansion was, honestly, remarkably sophisticated for its time. The order was divided into provinces, each headed by a master who reported to the Grand Master in Jerusalem. These provinces, initially corresponded to the major kingdoms of Europe: France, England, Aragon, Portugal, Poitou, Hungary, and others. Within each province, commanderies or preceptories were established on donated lands. These served multiple purposes. They were recruitment centers, training grounds for new members, agricultural enterprises that generated income, and administrative centers that collected donations and managed the order's affairs. The largest commanderies were substantial establishments with churches, dormitories, training grounds, agricultural buildings, and workshops. They became, integral parts of local economies, employing hundreds of workers and contributing to regional trade networks. The Templars developed a sophisticated hierarchy that reflected both their military and monastic nature. At the apex stood the Grand Master, elected for life by a complex process involving senior members of the order. Below him were the great officers, the seneschal, who served as deputy and advisor, the marshal, who commanded military operations, the commander of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, who managed the order's properties in the Holy Land, the draper, responsible for clothing and equipment, and others who oversaw various aspects of the order's operations. The bulk of the membership consisted of three main classes: knights, who were of noble birth and formed the heavy cavalry; sergeants, who were of common origin and served as light cavalry or infantry; and chaplains, who were ordained priests responsible for the spiritual needs of the order. The military organization of the Templars represented some of the most advanced tactical thinking of the medieval period. Their approach to warfare combined the traditional knightly emphasis on individual valor with an unprecedented level of discipline and coordination. Unlike secular knights, who often sought personal glory in battle, Templars were trained to fight as a unit, maintaining formation and following orders without question. The rules specifically forbade brothers from charging without permission, a restriction that went against every instinct of medieval knightly culture, but proved devastatingly effective in battle. Templar knights were equipped with the finest arms and armor available, standardized to ensure uniformity and effectiveness. Each knight brother was allocated 3 horses and a squire, while sergeant brothers received 1 horse. The order maintained strict standards for equipment, with detailed regulations covering everything from the type of lance points permitted to the color of horse equipment. Training was, both rigorous and continuous. New recruits underwent intensive preparation that included not just martial skills, but also religious education and indoctrination into the order's culture of absolute obedience. Physical conditioning was really emphasized, with brothers expected to maintain peak fitness, even though the monastic practices of fasting and sleep deprivation for prayer made that quite a challenge. The Templars, interestingly enough, pioneered the use of light cavalry tactics learned from their Muslim opponents. They incorporated Turkish-style mounted archery and hit-and-run tactics, alongside the traditional heavy cavalry charge. They also developed sophisticated siege warfare techniques, becoming true experts in both defending and attacking fortifications. The Templars' effectiveness in battle, it became legendary. Their discipline under fire, their refusal to retreat unless overwhelmingly outnumbered, and their willingness to fight to the death made them the shock troops of the Crusader armies. Muslim chroniclers, even while considering them enemies of Islam, often wrote with respect about Templar courage and military skill. The sight of Templar banners on the battlefield could inspire Christian forces and, honestly, strike fear into their enemies. Yet this military prowess came at a terrible cost. The Templars' refusal to retreat and their position at the forefront of battles meant that they suffered, disproportionate casualties. Entire contingents of Templars were sometimes wiped out in defeats, their adherence to their vows preventing them from seeking the survival that secular knights might pursue through flight or ransom. Perhaps even more revolutionary than their military innovations were the Templars' contributions to medieval finance. The combination of their international network, their reputation for honesty and reliability, and their need to transfer resources between Europe and the Holy Land led them to develop, sophisticated financial services that prefigured modern banking. The Templars created what was essentially the first international banking network, allowing pilgrims and crusaders to deposit funds at one Templar house and withdraw them at another, eliminating the need to carry large sums through dangerous territory. This system required, sophisticated record-keeping and communication networks, as well as standardized procedures that could be understood and implemented across linguistic and cultural boundaries. The letters of credit issued by the Templars were among the first such financial instruments in European history. A pilgrim could deposit money at the temple in London or Paris and receive a coded document that could be presented in Jerusalem to receive an equivalent sum, minus a fee for the service. This system required the Templars to maintain substantial reserves of cash at major centers and to develop methods for balancing accounts across their network. They also became major lenders, providing funds to monarchs, nobles, and merchants. The French monarchy, in particular, became heavily dependent on Templar loans, a relationship that would, ultimately, contribute to the order's downfall. The Templars' financial activities, extended well beyond simple banking. They were also deeply involved in property management, agricultural development, and trade. The architectural legacy of the Templars, interestingly, remains visible across Europe and the Middle East even today. Their distinctive round churches, which were modelled on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, can actually still be found in places like London, Cambridge, Tomar, and several other locations. These circular or octagonal structures, they represented a deliberate break from the traditional cruciform pattern of Christian churches. They served as a constant reminder of the order's connection to the Holy Land. But it was in military architecture that the Templars made their most significant contributions. The castles they built or rebuilt in the Crusader states represented the cutting edge of defensive technology. Fortresses like Safed in Galilee, Chastel Blanc in Syria, and their contributions to Crac des Chevaliers incorporated innovations such as concentric walls, sophisticated gate defences, and carefully calculated fields of fire that would influence castle design for centuries. These fortifications were not merely defensive structures, but complete military communities. A major Templar castle could house hundreds of knights and sergeants, along with support staff, craftsmen, and local workers. They included chapels for worship, halls for chapter meetings, extensive storerooms for provisions, workshops for maintaining equipment, and sophisticated water storage systems that allowed them to withstand lengthy sieges. The Templars' expertise in fortification extended to siege warfare, where they developed and refined techniques for both attacking and defending strongholds. Daily life within the Templar order was governed by a strict routine that balanced military readiness with monastic devotion. The Templar day began well before dawn with the service of matins, followed by a succession of prayers and religious offices that punctuated the day prime terce: sext, nun, vespers, and compline. Between these religious obligations, brothers engaged in military training, maintenance of equipment, administrative duties, or manual labor. Meals were taken in common in silence while a brother read from scripture or religious texts. The diet was simple but nutritious, with meat permitted 3 days a week except during fasts. Wine was allowed, but in moderation, watered down according to the rule. So the vow of poverty was taken seriously, at least in theory. Individual brothers owned nothing, and even the smallest personal items required permission from their superiors. Clothing was standardized and simple: white mantles for knights and brown or black for sergeants, with the distinctive red cross only added after papal permission was granted. Decoration or any sort of ostentation in dress or equipment was strictly forbidden. The vow of chastity, that was absolute, with the rule containing numerous provisions designed to prevent any occasion for temptation. Brothers were forbidden to kiss any woman, even their mothers or sisters, and were required to keep their distance from female servants in Templar establishments. Chapter meetings held weekly in each commandery provided a forum for confession of faults, administration of discipline, and discussion of the order's business. These meetings followed a strict protocol, with brothers confessing violations of the rule and receiving penances that could range from fasting to temporary expulsion from the community. Serious offences could result in permanent expulsion or even imprisonment. The emphasis on obedience was honestly absolute. The rule stated that obedience to superiors was obedience to God. This discipline, which was really unusual in an age where individual knights prized their independence, was key to the Templars' military effectiveness and organizational cohesion. The period from 1150 to 1250 marked the zenith of Templar power and influence. During these years, the order became not just a military force, but a major player in the political, economic, and religious life of both Europe and the Crusader states. The Templars' wealth had grown to, frankly, staggering proportions. They owned thousands of properties across Europe, ranging from small farms to vast estates. In some regions, they were among the largest landowners, with their properties enjoying exemption from many taxes and ecclesiastical dues. This wealth supported not only their military operations in the east, but also an extensive charitable network that included hospitals, hospices for pilgrims, and support for the poor. The papacy showered the Templars with privileges that made them really almost a church within the church. The bull Omne Datum Optimum, issued by Pope Innocent II in 1139, had granted them exemption from all ecclesiastical authority except the Pope himself. Subsequent bulls expanded these privileges, allowing them to collect their own tithes, bury their dead in their own cemeteries, even during interdicts, and absolve excommunicated persons who joined the order. These privileges, while strengthening the Templars' position, created resentment among secular clergy who saw their authority undermined and their revenues reduced. Bishops complained that Templars would arrive in towns under interdict, open their churches to all comers, and collect donations that would otherwise have gone to local parishes. The Templars' political influence extended to the highest levels of European society. They served as advisors to kings, negotiated treaties, and acted as mediators in disputes between Christian powers. Their international character and perceived neutrality made them ideal diplomats, while their military expertise made their counsel valuable in matters of war and defence. In England, the Master of the Temple sat in Parliament as a peer of the realm. In France, the Templars' Paris Temple served as a royal treasury, with the order's officials managing much of the kingdom's finances. The Grand Masters in Jerusalem often wielded influence comparable to that of the kings of Jerusalem themselves, sometimes supporting and sometimes opposing royal policies based on the order's interests. Naval operations became an increasingly important aspect of Templar activities during this period. The order developed a substantial fleet based in various Mediterranean ports, with major naval bases at Acre, Marseille, and other locations. These ships served multiple purposes, transporting pilgrims and crusaders, carrying supplies and reinforcements to the Holy Land, engaging in commercial trade, and conducting military operations against Muslim naval forces. The Templars became skilled in naval warfare and logistics, developing innovations in ship design and navigation. Their vessels were among the largest and most sophisticated of their time, capable of carrying hundreds of passengers or substantial cargo loads across the treacherous waters of the Mediterranean. The cultural and intellectual contributions of the Templars during their peak years are often overlooked in favor of their military activities. The order attracted educated members who brought knowledge from across Europe and the Mediterranean world. Templar houses became centers of learning where manuscripts were copied, languages were studied, and information was exchanged. The Templars' exposure to Islamic and Byzantine culture in the East led to a degree of cultural transmission that enriched European knowledge. They were among the first to adopt Arabic numerical notation in their accounting, introduced Eastern architectural techniques to Europe, and may have preserved and transmitted various scholarly works that would otherwise have been lost. The Second Crusade of 1147 to 1149 provided the first major test of the Templars as an established military order. When news of the fall of Edessa reached Europe in 1145, Pope Eugenius III called for a new crusade, with Bernard of Clairvaux serving as its primary preacher. The response was enthusiastic, with King Louis VII of France and Emperor Conrad III of Germany taking the cross. The Templars played a crucial role in the crusade from its inception, providing financial services to the crusading armies, advising the leaders on Eastern conditions, and contributing their own military forces. The march through Anatolia proved disastrous, with Turkish forces harassing the Crusaders and inflicting severe casualties. The Templars distinguished themselves in protecting the retreating forces, their discipline and cohesion preventing complete catastrophe. The failure of the Second Crusade to achieve its objectives paradoxically enhanced the Templars' reputation. While the secular leaders were blamed for the debacle, the Templars were praised for their courage and effectiveness. Their Grand Master, Everard de Bar, had personally saved King Louis VII during a Turkish ambush, further cementing the order's reputation for reliability in crisis. The aftermath of the Crusade saw increased donations to the Templars, as Europeans sought to support the most effective defenders of the Holy Land. The rise of Saladin in the 1170s and 1180s presented the Crusader states with their greatest challenge since their foundation. Saladin's unification of Egypt and Syria created a powerful Muslim state that surrounded the Christian territories. The Templars found themselves on the front lines of an increasingly desperate defensive war. They garrisoned key fortresses along the borders, conducted raids into Muslim territory, and provided the professional military corps around which Crusader armies could form. The disaster at the Battle of Hattin on July 4, 1187, demonstrated both the Templars' courage and the limitations of their approach to warfare. The Crusader army, including a large Templar contingent, was trapped without water in the heat of summer by Saladin's forces. Despite the hopelessness of their situation, the Templars fought with characteristic determination. When the battle was lost and most of the Crusader nobility surrendered, the captured Templars and Hospitallers were separated from other prisoners. Saladin, recognizing them as irreconcilable enemies of Islam, ordered their execution. Over 200 Templar knights were beheaded, choosing death over the apostasy that would have saved their lives. The fall of Jerusalem to Saladin later that year was a catastrophic blow to the Crusader cause and to the Templars in particular. The loss of their headquarters on the Temple Mount forced them to relocate their central operations to Acre, which would remain their base for the next century. The Third Crusade, launched in response to Jerusalem's fall, saw the Templars playing crucial roles despite their reduced numbers. They worked closely with Richard I of England, providing him with military support, financial resources, and, invaluable knowledge of local conditions. The Templars fought in all of the major engagements of the Crusade, from the Siege of Acre to the battles of Arsuf and Jaffa. Their discipline complemented Richard's tactical genius, contributing to the Crusade's limited successes. Throughout the 13th century, the Templars continued their military operations not only in the Holy Land but also in Iberia, where the Reconquista against Muslim rule provided another theatre for holy war. The Templars established a strong presence in the Spanish and Portuguese kingdoms, where they were granted castles and lands in return for their military service against the Moors. The castle of Ponferrada in Leon, the fortress of Miravet in Catalonia, and, numerous other strongholds became centres of Templar power. In Portugal, they played a particularly important role, with the Master of the Temple in Portugal becoming one of the kingdom's most powerful nobles. The Iberian Templars adapted their tactics to the different conditions of warfare in the peninsula, becoming skilled in the rapid raids and frontier warfare that really characterized the Reconquista. The Templars' relationship with the Islamic world was more complex than simple military opposition. Through their long presence in the East, they developed a nuanced understanding of Islamic culture and politics. There were, in fact, periods of truce and even cooperation, with Templars and Muslim leaders negotiating prisoner exchanges, trade agreements, and temporary alliances against common enemies. Some Muslim chroniclers wrote with respect about Templar honor and reliability, even while condemning them as enemies of Islam. The Templars employed Muslim craftsmen and workers on their estates, and there is evidence of cultural exchange in areas such as architecture, military technology, and administrative practices. This cultural interaction led to persistent rumors and suspicions about the Templars' orthodoxy. Their long exposure to Eastern ways, their employment of Muslim servants, and, their occasional diplomatic dealings with Islamic leaders fueled speculation that they had been corrupted by heretical influences. These suspicions, largely unfounded during the Order's peak, would later be exploited by their enemies. The Templars' use of Arabic-speaking interpreters and their knowledge of Islamic customs, while practically necessary for their mission, appeared suspicious to those who had never left Europe. Internal challenges began to mount for the Templars even during their period of greatest power. The vast wealth of the Order created temptations that conflicted with their vows of poverty. While individual brothers remained poor, the Order as an institution controlled enormous resources. This wealth was necessary for their military operations, but it also attracted criticism from those who saw a contradiction between the Templars' professed humility and their corporate riches. Some brothers, particularly those in comfortable European commanderies far from the dangers of the Holy Land, may have grown lax in their observance of the rule. Reports of pride, arrogance, and high-handed behavior by Templar officials began to circulate, damaging the Order's reputation for humility and service. The military orders, including the Templars, Hospitallers, and later arrivals like the Teutonic Knights, often found themselves in competition and conflict. While they shared the common goal of defending Christendom, rivalries over resources, jurisdiction, and military strategy created tensions that sometimes erupted into open conflict. The Templars and Hospitallers, in particular, developed a rivalry that occasionally undermined Christian unity in the face of Muslim threats. These disputes, often over castles, revenues, or military command, scandalized European observers and provided ammunition for critics of the military orders. Attempts at reform within the order met with mixed success. Some Grand Masters, recognizing the dangers of complacency and corruption, attempted to reinforce discipline and return to the austere ideals of the founders. Visitations were conducted to inspect commanderies and correct abuses. The rule was expanded and clarified through additional regulations known as retraits, which addressed issues that had arisen since the original rule was written. However, the very size and complexity of the order made comprehensive reform difficult. The autonomy enjoyed by provincial masters and the vast distances between commanderies meant that central control was often more theoretical than practical. The fall of Acre in 1291 marked the end of the Crusader presence in the mainland Levant and precipitated the crisis that would ultimately destroy the Templars. The siege of Acre by the Mamluk Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil was the culmination of a steady Muslim reconquest that had reduced the Crusader states to just a few coastal cities. The Templars played a heroic role in the doomed defense of Acre, with their fortress holding out even after the city walls had been breached. The last Templar marshal, Peter de Severy, negotiated a truce to evacuate civilians from the Templar compound. But when Muslim troops violated the agreement, the Templars fought to the last man. The tower they defended finally collapsed, killing defenders and attackers alike in what was really a fitting symbol of the Crusades' end. The evacuation to Cyprus represented, well, a fundamental crisis of purpose for the Templars. For nearly 2 centuries their identity had been bound up with the defense of the Holy Land. Now, exiled to Cyprus, they faced an uncertain future. Some advocated for new crusades to reclaim the lost territories, but European enthusiasm for Eastern adventures had really waned. Others proposed redirecting the order's mission to other frontiers of Christendom, or focusing on naval operations against Muslim pirates. The Templars established a new headquarters in Cyprus and maintained their military readiness, but they increasingly appeared to be a solution in search of a problem. The loss of their primary mission coincided with changes in European society that made the Templars, well, increasingly anachronistic. The rise of professional armies reduced the military importance of the crusading orders. The development of banking houses in Italian cities provided alternative financial services. The growth of centralized monarchies made independent, international organizations like the Templars appear as threats to royal authority. Most dangerously, the Templars' wealth, accumulated over 2 centuries of donations and successful management, attracted the covetous attention of cash-strapped monarchs. Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, embodied the new style of European monarchy that would prove fatal to the Templars. Ambitious, ruthless, and perpetually short of funds for his wars and governmental reforms, Philip had already demonstrated his willingness to attack previously sacrosanct institutions. He had taxed the French clergy despite papal prohibition, leading to a bitter conflict with Pope Boniface VIII. He had expelled the Jews from France in 1306, seizing their property to replenish his treasury. The Templars, with their vast wealth and their independence from royal authority, presented an irresistible target. Philip's financial dependence on the Templars added a personal dimension to his motivations. The French crown owed enormous sums to the order, and Philip had actually been forced to take refuge in the Paris Temple during a riot in 1306, giving him a first-hand view of the Templars' wealth. The combination of debt, greed, and the desire to assert royal authority over all institutions within France, well, it created a deadly convergence of interests. Philip began to lay the groundwork for action against the Templars, but he needed more than financial motivations to justify moving against an order protected by the Church. The king found his weapon in the person of Jacques de Molay, a former Templar who came forward with sensational allegations against the order. The exact nature of de Molay's motivations remains unclear. He may have been expelled from the order and seeking revenge, or he may have been an agent of Philip from the beginning. His charges were explosive. The Templars, he claimed, forced new members to deny Christ, spit on the cross, and engage in homosexual acts. They worshipped an idol called Baphomet and conducted secret ceremonies that mocked Christian rituals. These allegations, however fantastic, provided Philip with the religious cover he needed for his assault on the order. Philip spent months in careful preparation, maintaining absolute secrecy while positioning his forces. He secured the cooperation of Guillaume de Nogaret, his chief minister who had previously orchestrated the attack on Pope Boniface VIII. Together they developed a plan of stunning audacity, the simultaneous arrest of every Templar in France. Orders were prepared and sealed, to be opened only on the designated day. Philip also worked to ensure papal acquiescence, if not support. Pope Clement V, a Frenchman who owed his election partly to Philip's influence, was weak and susceptible to pressure. While not initially supportive of action against the Templars, Clement was in no position to resist Philip's determination. The blow fell on Friday, October 13th, 1307, a date that would become infamous in Templar legend. At dawn, royal officials across France broke the seals on their orders and moved to arrest every Templar they could find. The operation was remarkably successful, catching the order completely by surprise. In Paris, Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master who had come to France to discuss a new crusade, was arrested along with 60 knights. Across France, hundreds of Templars were taken into custody, their properties sealed and their goods inventoried. The charge read against them was heresy, the most serious accusation possible in medieval society. The interrogations began almost immediately, conducted by royal officials and inquisitors working in cooperation. The methods used were those standard to the Inquisition, including torture to extract confessions. The strappado, where victims were suspended by their wrists tied behind their backs, was commonly employed. Other tortures included the rack, burning of the feet, and starvation. Under such duress, many Templars confessed to some or all of the charges against them. The confessions varied in detail, but generally included denial of Christ, spitting on or trampling the cross, obscene kisses exchanged during reception ceremonies, and permission for homosexual acts. Some confessed to worshipping an idol described variously as a head, a cat, or a bearded figure called Baphomet. The speed with which confessions were obtained seemed to validate Philip's charges, but the circumstances of their extraction raised doubts even among contemporaries. Many Templars later recanted their confessions when removed from immediate torture, claiming they had spoken only to stop their sufferings. The pattern of confessions, with their suspicious uniformity on key points while varying in details, suggested coaching by interrogators. Most tellingly, Templars arrested outside France, where torture was not immediately applied, uniformly denied all charges against the order. Jacques de Molay's confession was particularly damaging to the order's cause. On October 24th, just 11 days after his arrest, the Grand Master confessed to denying Christ and spitting on the cross during his reception into the order. His confession was made public and used to justify the arrests to a shocked European audience. The reasons for de Molay's confession remain debated. He may have been tortured, though he showed no obvious signs of physical abuse when he appeared in public. He may have been promised leniency or genuinely believed that cooperation would lead to the order's vindication. Some historians suggest he was simply unprepared for the sophistication of the charges and the determination of his persecutors. Pope Clement V found himself in an impossible position. The arrest of the Templars without papal authorization was a clear violation of their exempt status, but the confessions obtained by Philip created a scandal that the Church could not ignore. Clement initially protested the arrests and suspended the inquisitors involved, but Philip's pressure was relentless. The French king threatened to revive charges of heresy against the late Pope Boniface VIII and hinted at action against Clement himself. Caught between his duty to protect the Church's prerogatives and the political reality of French power, Clement temporized and eventually capitulated. The papal bull Pastoralis Praeeminentiae, issued in November 1307, ordered all Christian monarchs to arrest Templars in their territories and sequester their property. This legitimized Philip's actions retrospectively and internationalized the persecution. However, the response varied dramatically across Europe. In England, Edward II initially defended the Templars, many of whom were his friends and advisors. Only under intense pressure did he order arrests, and even then English authorities showed little enthusiasm for torture or persecution. In Iberia, the Templars were arrested but generally treated well, with local authorities skeptical of the charges. In Germany and Italy, responses varied by region, with some areas protecting Templars and others following the French example. The years 1308 to 1310 saw a complex legal and political battle over the fate of the order. Clement V established papal commissions to investigate the charges, attempting to assert church authority over what had begun as a royal initiative. On May 12, 1310, 54 Templars were burned at the stake outside Paris. This brutal action effectively ended organized resistance within France, as remaining Templars understood that defending the order meant certain death. The Council of Vienne, convened in October 1311, was intended to definitively resolve the Templar question along with other church reforms. The council, held in French territory, was dominated by French prelates and conducted under the shadow of royal power. Despite this, the majority of bishops remained unconvinced of the Templars' guilt. When formal votes were taken, most participants favoured allowing the Templars to present a defence. Clement V, caught between the council's scepticism and Philip's demands, chose a radical solution. Rather than condemning the Templars for heresy, which the evidence could not support, he dissolved the order on administrative grounds. The papal bull Vox in Excelso, promulgated on March 22, 1312, declared the order suppressed, not condemned. Clement argued that the scandals surrounding the Templars, regardless of their actual guilt, had so damaged their reputation that they could no longer effectively serve their purpose. The bull was read to the council despite protests from many bishops, with Clement threatening excommunication for any who opposed it. This juridical sleight of hand allowed Clement to satisfy Philip, while avoiding a formal declaration that would have endorsed judicial murder. The companion bull Ad Providam transferred most Templar properties to the Knights Hospitaller, though in practice much of the wealth ended up in royal hands, particularly in France. The final act of the Templar tragedy played out over the next 2 years. Most ordinary Templars were eventually released after penances, often joining other religious orders or returning to secular life. The leaders of the order, however, remained in custody awaiting final judgment. On March 18, 1314, Jacques de Molay and 3 other high-ranking Templars were brought before a platform erected before Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. They expected to receive life imprisonment based on their confessions. Instead, when called upon to publicly confirm their guilt, de Molay and Geoffrey de Charny, the preceptor of Normandy, dramatically recanted all their confessions and proclaimed the order's innocence. This unexpected defiance threw the proceedings into chaos. Philip, furious at this public challenge, intervened personally. Without waiting for church authorities, he declared de Molay and de Charny relapsed heretics and ordered their immediate execution. That evening, as the sun set over the Seine, the 2 elderly Templars were burned at the stake on the Île aux Juifs, a small island in the river. Legend holds that de Molay, from the flames, cursed both Philip and Clement, calling them to join him before God's tribunal within a year. Whether or not such a curse was actually pronounced, both king and pope were indeed dead within the year. Clement in April and Philip in November 1314. The immediate aftermath of the Templars' dissolution varied dramatically across Europe. In France, royal officials moved quickly to secure Templar properties, conducting detailed inventories that provide valuable historical evidence of the order's wealth and activities. However, much of the movable wealth seemed to have vanished, fueling legends of hidden Templar treasures. Some properties were transferred to the Hospitallers as mandated, but Philip extracted enormous fees for expenses incurred in prosecuting the Templars, effectively keeping much of the wealth for the crown. The French monarchy also retained numerous Templar buildings, including the Paris Temple, which continued to serve as a royal treasury until the French Revolution. In England, the process was more orderly and less rapacious. Edward II, who had initially resisted the persecution, eventually allowed Templar properties to be transferred to the Hospitallers with less royal interference. Many English Templars were pensioned off or allowed to join other religious orders. The famous Temple Church in London passed to the lawyers who occupied the surrounding buildings. becoming the spiritual centre of the legal profession that endures to this day. In Scotland, where Robert the Bruce was under excommunication and fighting for independence, the papal bulls were largely ignored. This has led to persistent legends about Templars finding refuge in Scotland and influencing Scottish Freemasonry, though historical evidence for such connections remains tenuous. The Iberian Peninsula saw perhaps the most positive outcome for former Templars. In Aragon and Catalonia, investigations found the Templars innocent of all charges, though the order was still dissolved in accordance with papal decree. In Portugal, King Denis I protected the Templars and negotiated with the papacy to create a new order, the Order of Christ, which inherited most Templar properties and personnel in Portugal. This order would later play a crucial role in Portuguese exploration, with Prince Henry the Navigator serving as its Grand Master. In Castile's Templar properties were absorbed by other military orders, particularly the Order of Calatrava. Many Iberian Templars simply transferred to these other orders, continuing their military religious vocation under different names. The fate of individual Templars after the dissolution presents a complex picture. Those who survived the persecution faced diverse futures. Some, broken by torture and imprisonment, died shortly after their release. Others successfully integrated into different religious orders, with the Cistercians and Augustinians receiving many former Templars. Some returned to secular life, though the stigma of association with the order could make this difficult. In regions where the persecution had been less severe, former Templars sometimes received pensions from their confiscated properties, allowing them to live out their days in modest comfort. A few may have maintained informal networks, gathering secretly to preserve something of their former brotherhood, though evidence for organized survival is lacking. The question of hidden Templar treasures has fascinated observers since the day of the arrests. When royal officials inventoried Templar properties, they found less movable wealth than expected, given the order's reputation for riches. The Templars' treasury in Paris, which should have contained enormous sums, yielded relatively modest amounts. Several possibilities exist. The Templars may have been less wealthy than supposed, with their riches tied up in land and buildings. They may have had advance warning and hidden or dispersed their treasures, or the royal officials themselves may have appropriated more than they reported. The Templar fleet based at La Rochelle allegedly disappeared before the arrests, leading to speculation about Templars escaping with treasure to Scotland, America, or other refuges. While such stories make for exciting fiction, historical evidence suggests more mundane explanations: ships sold, scuttled, or simply appropriated without record. The dissolution of the Templars marked a turning point in medieval history, signaling the triumph of secular royal power over international religious institutions. Philip IV's successful destruction of the order demonstrated that even organizations under papal protection could be eliminated if they stood in the way of royal ambitions. This precedent would echo through subsequent centuries as monarchs increasingly asserted control over religious institutions within their territories. The methods used — secret planning, coordinated arrests, torture to obtain confessions, and manipulation of legal procedures — provided a template for later persecutions. The Spanish Inquisition, the Tudor dissolution of monasteries, and even modern totalitarian purges can trace some of their methods to Philip's campaign against the Templars. The Templar myth began almost immediately after the order's suppression. The dramatic nature of their fall, the mysteries surrounding the charges against them, and the legends of hidden treasures and secret knowledge proved honestly irresistible to storytellers and conspiracy theorists. Medieval chroniclers, troubadours, and romance writers incorporated Templar themes into their works, often portraying the knights as tragic heroes brought down by greed and jealousy. The Grail romances, which had begun to circulate before the Templars' fall, became retroactively associated with the order, with some versions suggesting the Templars were guardians of the Holy Grail or other sacred relics. The Renaissance and Reformation periods saw renewed interest in the Templars as examples of medieval corruption or church persecution, depending on the writer's perspective. Protestant reformers sometimes portrayed the Templars as early victims of papal tyranny, while Catholic writers used them as examples of how heresy could corrupt even seemingly devout organizations. The Age of Enlightenment brought more critical historical examination, with scholars like Voltaire defending the Templars as victims of royal greed and superstition. However, this period also saw the proliferation of esoteric and occult interpretations, with groups like the Freemasons claiming spiritual descent from the Templars. The 18th century witnessed an explosion of Templar-inspired organizations and myths. Various Masonic rites incorporated Templar grades and rituals, claiming to preserve secret knowledge passed down from the medieval order. The strict observance, a German Masonic system, claimed direct descent from Templars who had fled to Scotland. In France, Neo-Templar orders emerged claiming fantastic histories and possessing supposed secret documents proving Templar survival. These organizations, while historically dubious, kept Templar imagery and ideals alive in European consciousness. The French Revolution added another layer to Templar mythology when revolutionaries executed Louis XVI in the former Templar precinct, with some claiming this as delayed vengeance for Jacques de Molay. So during the 19th century, the Romantic movement really embraced the Templars as these archetypal medieval heroes. Sir Walter Scott's novels, especially Ivanhoe, presented the Templars as complex figures, kind of embodying both the nobility and the corruption of the medieval world. Historians started to get into some serious archival research about the order, publishing document collections that, allowed for a more accurate understanding of Templar history. However, this scholarly work was competing with increasingly elaborate mythologies. Occultists like Eliphas Levi, for instance, connected the Templars to supposed ancient wisdom traditions, while conspiracy theorists linked them to everything from the Illuminati to, nascent world government plots. The 20th century saw both the apotheosis of Templar mythology and, at the same time, some really serious scholarly efforts to understand the historical order. Academic historians like Malcolm Barber, Helen Nicholson and others produced rigorous studies based on extensive archival research which revealed the mundane reality behind many myths while still acknowledging the order's genuine historical importance. Archaeological investigations of Templar sites provided new insights into their daily life, architectural techniques and economic activities. Meanwhile, popular culture embraced the Templars with honestly unprecedented enthusiasm. They appeared in countless novels, films, video games, and television programs, usually portrayed as guardians of ancient secrets or participants in vast conspiracies. The publication of The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail in 1982 marked a watershed in popular Templar mythology, proposing, an elaborate conspiracy theory involving the Templars, the Merovingian dynasty, and the bloodline of Jesus Christ. While thoroughly debunked by historians, such theories found a massive audience, culminating in Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, which brought Templar conspiracy theories to a global readership. These popular works, while historically inaccurate, really demonstrate the enduring power of the Templar myth and its ability to adapt to contemporary concerns and interests. Modern Neo-Templar organizations continue to proliferate, ranging from charitable groups using Templar imagery to elaborate initiatory orders claiming historical continuity. Some focus on charitable work and historical commemoration, while others promote various esoteric or conspiracy theories. The Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem, recognized by the United Nations as a non-governmental organization, engages in humanitarian work while maintaining Templar traditions. Other groups focus on historical reenactment, scholarly research, or spiritual development inspired by perceived Templar ideals. The scholarly consensus on the Templars has evolved considerably with access to better sources and more sophisticated analytical methods. Modern historians generally reject the charges of heresy as fabricated, viewing the Templars' destruction as primarily motivated by greed and politics rather than genuine religious concerns. The order is now understood as a complex institution that played crucial roles in medieval warfare, finance, and cultural exchange. Their contributions to banking, architecture, and military science are recognized as significant innovations that influence subsequent developments. The darker aspects of their history, participation in warfare, accumulation of wealth, and occasional abuses of power, are acknowledged without diminishing appreciation for their genuine achievements and sacrifices. Archaeological investigations continue to reveal new information about Templar sites and activities. Excavations at Templar castles, commanderies, and churches have uncovered details about daily life, economic activities, and architectural techniques. Advanced technologies like ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery have identified previously unknown Templar sites and revealed hidden features of known locations. These investigations have generally confirmed the historical record, while adding nuance and detail to our understanding of how the Templars lived and worked. The Templars' influence on subsequent military orders and institutions remains a subject of scholarly interest. The Hospitallers, who inherited much of the Templar infrastructure, incorporated many of their military and administrative innovations. The Spanish and Portuguese military orders that absorbed Templar properties and personnel carried on many of their traditions. Even modern military organizations can trace some concepts, like unit discipline, standardized equipment, and international logistics, to innovations pioneered by the Templars. Their influence on banking and finance, while often overstated in popular accounts, did contribute to the development of international financial instruments and practices. The legal legacy of the Templar trials continues to resonate in discussions of justice and due process. The use of torture to obtain confessions, the manipulation of legal procedures for political ends, and the destruction of an organization through orchestrated charges provide cautionary examples relevant to modern concerns about justice and human rights. Legal historians study the Templar trials as a crucial episode in the development of inquisitorial procedures and the tension between secular and ecclesiastical jurisdiction. The case remains a powerful example of how legal systems can be subverted for political purposes even when formal procedures are followed. Cultural representations of the Templars continue to evolve, reflecting changing social concerns and interests. In video games, they often appear as either heroic guardians of ancient wisdom or, sinister conspirators seeking world domination. Films and television series use Templar themes to explore issues of faith, power, and corruption. Literary works range from serious historical fiction attempting to accurately portray medieval life to, fantasy novels using Templars as magical warriors. These diverse representations, while often historically inaccurate, demonstrate the flexibility and endurance of the Templar myth as a vehicle for exploring contemporary themes. The question of Templar survival and influence remains contentious between academic historians and popular writers. While no credible evidence supports organizational continuity between the medieval Templars and later groups claiming their heritage, the influence of Templar ideals and imagery is undeniable. The concept of warrior monks dedicated to a higher cause continues to resonate, inspiring both admiration and suspicion. The Templars have become a screen onto which various groups project their own values and concerns, whether these involve traditional Christianity, esoteric spirituality, or secular conspiracy theories. Educational approaches to Templar history have evolved to address both scholarly understanding and popular mythology. Universities offer courses examining the Templars in their medieval context, while also analyzing the development of Templar myths. Museums with Templar collections strive to present accurate historical information while acknowledging the popular fascination with Templar mysteries. Documentary productions attempt to balance entertainment value with historical accuracy, though with varying degrees of success. The challenge remains to convey the genuine historical importance of the Templars, while addressing and correcting popular misconceptions. The Templars' relevance to contemporary issues ensures continued interest in their history. Discussions of religious extremism often reference the Templars as examples of both religious dedication and the dangers of fanaticism. Debates over the relationship between religion and violence find in the Templars a complex case study that, really defies simple categorization. Economic historians study their financial innovations in the context of globalization and international banking. Military historians examine their tactics and organization for insights into asymmetric warfare and the role of ideology in military effectiveness. As we reflect on the entire arc of Templar history, from their humble beginnings in 1119 to their dramatic destruction in 1314 and their extraordinary afterlife in myth and memory, several themes emerge with striking clarity. The Templars embodied the contradictions and complexities of medieval civilization. combining sincere religious devotion with military violence, monastic poverty with corporate wealth, international idealism with practical politics. Their rise demonstrated the power of an idea whose time had come, as Europe channeled its military energies into religious purposes. Their fall illustrated the vulnerability of even the most powerful institutions when they outlived their purpose and stood in the way of emerging new powers. The historical Templars deserve to be remembered for their genuine achievements, their courage in defending pilgrims and crusader territories, their innovations in military organization and tactics, their contributions to international finance and trade, their architectural legacy, and their role in facilitating cultural exchange between East and West. They also serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, the vulnerability of institutions to political manipulation, and the ease with which legal systems can be corrupted for unjust ends. The tragedy of their destruction reminds us that justice and truth can be casualties when political power combines with greed and fear. Ah, the mythical Templars. Products of, 7 centuries of speculation, fiction and imagination, they tell us more about the societies that created these myths than about the medieval order itself. Quite fascinating, isn't it? Each era has reimagined the Templars to reflect its own preoccupations. Medieval writers saw them as tragic heroes. Enlightenment thinkers, on the other hand, viewed them as victims of superstition. Then came the Romantics, who saw them as mysterious guardians of ancient wisdom, and of course modern conspiracy theorists see them as key players in vast historical plots. It's really quite a journey through time, isn't it? This myth-making process, while often frustrating to historians seeking truth, demonstrates the human need for mystery and meaning. There's something about the appeal of secret knowledge and the enduring fascination with those who dedicate themselves completely to a cause. It's a powerful thing, really. This, really demonstrates the human need for mystery and meaning, the appeal of secret knowledge and the enduring fascination with those who dedicate themselves completely to a cause. The Templar story ultimately transcends the boundaries of medieval history to become a meditation on timeless themes: the relationship between faith and power, the corruption of ideals by wealth and politics, the tension between individual conscience and institutional authority, and the ways in which history is remembered, forgotten, and reimagined. Their white mantles emblazoned with red crosses have become symbols that, evoke different responses. Admiration for their courage and dedication, suspicion of their power and secrecy, fascination with their mysteries, and horror at their destruction. In this multiplicity of meanings, the Templars achieve a kind of immortality that their medieval brothers could never have imagined. The continuing scholarly investigation of the Templars demonstrates that historical understanding is never complete or final. It's like peeling back layers of time, always revealing more. New documents continue to surface in archives, providing fresh insights into Templar activities and organization. Advances in archaeological techniques reveal previously hidden aspects of Templar sites. It's fascinating how the past keeps speaking to us. Interdisciplinary approaches combining history, archaeology, art history, and economic analysis create more nuanced understandings of the order's role in medieval society. These varied perspectives help us see the bigger picture, don't they? Digital humanities projects are making Templar-related documents more accessible to researchers worldwide, enabling new forms of analysis and collaboration. These ongoing efforts ensure that our understanding of the historical Templars continues to evolve and deepen. The pedagogical value of Templar history extends beyond medieval studies. Their story provides compelling case studies for courses in religious studies, military history, economic history, legal history, and the history of ideas. Students examining the Templars must grapple with complex questions about historical evidence, the reliability of sources produced under torture, the interaction of myth and history, and the ways in which past events are interpreted and reinterpreted by successive generations. The Templars offer a particularly rich example of how historical events become transformed into cultural myths, and how these myths can take on lives of their own, independent of historical reality. The global reach of Templar mythology reflects the order's transformation from a specifically medieval and European phenomenon into, a universal symbol. Templar imagery and themes appear in cultures far removed from medieval Christianity, adapted and reinterpreted to fit local contexts and concerns. In Japan, manga and anime incorporate Templar warriors into fantasy narratives. In Latin America, esoteric groups blend Templar symbolism with indigenous traditions. In the Middle East, where the historical Templars were enemies, they sometimes appear in popular culture as complex figures representing the historical encounter between civilizations. This global diffusion demonstrates how powerful historical symbols can transcend their original contexts to become part of a shared human cultural vocabulary. The digital age has transformed both the study and mythologization of the Templars. Online databases make medieval documents accessible to researchers worldwide, enabling more comprehensive and collaborative scholarship. Digital reconstruction techniques allow virtual exploration of destroyed Templar sites. Social media platforms facilitate the rapid spread of both scholarly information and conspiracy theories about the Templars. And online gaming communities create elaborate Templar-themed narratives and virtual worlds. The internet has become a battlefield between those seeking to promote historical understanding and those propagating sensationalist myths, with the Templars serving as a prime example of how historical information and misinformation compete in the digital sphere. The commercialization of Templar imagery raises interesting questions about the commodification of history. Templar symbols appear on everything from jewelry to motorcycle clubs, often with little connection to historical reality. Tourist sites associated with the Templars, whether genuinely historical or tenuously connected, attract millions of visitors annually. The Templar brand has become valuable intellectual property, fought over by various groups claiming authentic connection to the medieval order. This commercialization, while sometimes trivializing historical understanding, also maintains public interest in medieval history and can serve as a gateway to more serious historical study. The Templars' story continues to offer relevant lessons for contemporary institutions and organizations. Their rapid growth from a small brotherhood to an international power demonstrates both the potential and perils of institutional success. Their combination of idealistic mission and practical operations provides a model that modern, non-governmental organizations study and sometimes emulate. Their destruction offers warnings about the dangers of accumulating wealth and power without maintaining political support and public legitimacy. Modern military organizations study Templar tactics and organization for insights into unit cohesion, morale, and the role of ideology in military effectiveness. The ethical questions raised by Templar history remain pertinent to modern debates. The concept of holy war, central to the Templar mission, continues to generate controversy and discussion in an era of religious conflict and terrorism. The use of torture to obtain confessions, so central to the Templars' destruction, resonates with contemporary debates about interrogation techniques and human rights. The tension between religious authority and secular power that characterized the Templar trials continues in various forms in modern societies. The question of whether ends justify means, implicit in both Templar military activities and their persecution, remains a fundamental ethical challenge. The historiographical evolution of Templar studies illustrates broader trends in historical scholarship. Early chroniclers and historians often accepted sources uncritically, perpetuating both myths and misunderstandings. The professionalization of historical study in the 19th and 20th centuries brought more rigorous source criticism and contextual analysis. In recent decades, there's been, increased attention to aspects of Templar history that were previously kind of marginalized. This includes things like their economic activities, their relationships with non-Christian populations, and even the experiences of non-noble members of the order. This evolution really demonstrates how historical understanding develops through successive generations of scholarship, with each one building on and sometimes challenging previous interpretations. The interdisciplinary nature of modern Templar studies, it really enriches our understanding of the order and its broader context. Art historians, for example, analyze Templar architectural innovations and how they influenced the Gothic style. Economic historians use Templar financial records to gain insights into medieval banking and trade. And military historians, they study Templar tactics and fortifications for a better understanding of medieval warfare. Archaeologists excavate Templar sites to get a sense of daily life and material culture. Meanwhile, literary scholars examine how Templar themes appear in both medieval and modern literature. This interdisciplinary approach honestly creates a more complete and nuanced picture than any single discipline could achieve on its own. The preservation and interpretation of Templar heritage sites present ongoing challenges and opportunities, Many Templar castles, churches, and commanderies survive in various states of preservation, requiring decisions about conservation, restoration, and presentation to the public. It's fascinating how some sites have been carefully preserved and interpreted to convey accurate historical information. On the other hand, others have been heavily restored or reconstructed based on romantic notions rather than archaeological evidence. The challenge really lies in balancing preservation needs, tourist expectations, and historical accuracy. Successful heritage sites manage to convey both the historical reality of the Templars and acknowledge the myths that draw many visitors. The role of the Templars in fostering medieval cultural exchange deserves greater recognition, I must say. Their presence in the multicultural environment of the Crusader states exposed them to Byzantine, Islamic, and Eastern Christian traditions. They employed translators, conducted diplomatic negotiations, and facilitated the exchange of knowledge between East and West. It's quite remarkable, isn't it? Templar commanderies in Europe received brothers who had served in the East, bringing with them new ideas, techniques, and perspectives. While the Templars were certainly warriors engaged in religious conflict, they were also inadvertent agents of cultural transmission, contributing to the flow of knowledge that would eventually help spark the Renaissance. It's an intriguing aspect of their legacy, don't you think? The financial innovations of the Templars, often overshadowed by their military activities, had lasting impacts on European economic development. Their system of international credit transfers, actually presaged modern banking practices. Their agricultural management techniques, developed to maximize income from their estates, influenced farming practices across Europe. Their standardized accounting methods and centralized financial control provided models for both ecclesiastical and secular institutions. The Templars demonstrated that a religious organization could successfully engage in sophisticated economic activities, paving the way for the later economic activities of other religious orders and ultimately contributing to the development of capitalism. The psychological impact of the Templars' destruction, it reverberated through medieval society and beyond. The shock of seeing such a powerful and seemingly protected organization utterly destroyed created a sense of insecurity among other religious orders and institutions. If the Templars could fall, who was safe? This insecurity contributed to a more cautious and defensive attitude among religious orders, who became more careful to maintain royal favor and avoid accumulating too much visible wealth or power. The memory of the Templars' fate served as a warning that would influence institutional behavior for generations. The question of justice denied continues to haunt the Templar story. Modern legal scholars who examine the trial records are virtually unanimous in concluding that the Templars were victims of a gross miscarriage of justice. The use of torture, the denial of proper defense, the political manipulation of legal procedures, and the predetermined outcome violate every principle of fair trial. Yet this injustice was perpetrated through formally correct legal procedures, demonstrating how legal systems can be corrupted while maintaining a facade of legitimacy. The Templar case remains a powerful reminder that legal procedures alone do not guarantee justice without independence, integrity, and respect for human rights. The transformation of the Templars from history to myth illustrates the power of narrative in human culture. The basic story, a powerful organization brought low by greed and false accusations, resonates across cultures and centuries. Each retelling adds new elements, emphasizes different aspects, and adapts the story to contemporary concerns. The mythical Templars have become more real to many people than the historical order, demonstrating how cultural memory can diverge from historical reality. This process of mythification is not unique to the Templars, but provides a particularly clear example of how history becomes legend. The search for Templar origins and influences has led researchers down many fascinating paths. Studies of earlier military brotherhoods, such as the confraternities that protected pilgrims in Spain, provide context for understanding how the Templar concept emerged. Investigation of contemporary religious and military movements helps explain why the Templar model proved so successful and influential. Research into the sources of Templar spirituality, including Cistercian monasticism and Augustinian theology, illuminates the religious worldview that motivated Templar brothers. These investigations reveal the Templars not as an isolated phenomenon, but as a product of their time that synthesized various contemporary trends into a new and powerful institution. The material culture of the Templars, revealed through archaeological investigation, provides intimate glimpses into their daily lives. Excavations have uncovered everything from elaborate chapel decorations to simple cooking pots, from weapons and armor to agricultural tools. These artifacts tell stories that written records often omit: the daily routines of prayer and work, the dietary habits of brothers, the crafts and industries that supported Templar communities. Analysis of Templar cemeteries provides information about health, diet, and demographics. This archaeological evidence grounds our understanding of the Templars in physical reality, counterbalancing the tendency toward romanticization. The linguistic legacy of the Templars appears in various forms across European languages. Place names throughout Europe preserve memory of Templar presence. Temple districts in London and Paris, numerous locations named Tempelhof, Tempelhof, or similar variants. Legal and financial terminology sometimes traces back to Templar innovations. The word temple itself carries associations with the order that influence its use in various contexts. Phrases and expressions in various languages preserve folk memories of the Templars, often reflecting either admiration or suspicion. This linguistic legacy demonstrates how deeply the Templars penetrated European consciousness. The comparative study of the Templars with other military orders illuminates both their uniqueness and their participation in broader trends. The Hospitallers, Teutonic Knights, and Iberian military orders each developed distinctive characteristics, while sharing basic features with the Templars. Comparing their rules, organizational structures, military tactics, and economic activities reveals both common patterns and significant variations. The survival of some orders while the Templars perished provides insights into the factors that determine institutional longevity. These comparisons help us understand the Templars as part of a broader phenomenon, while appreciating their specific contributions and fate. The gendered dimensions of Templar history, long neglected, have recently received more attention. While the Templars were an exclusively male order, women played various roles in their story. Female patrons provided crucial support through donations and political influence. The wives and families of men who joined the order experienced significant life changes. Some women sought association with the Templars through confraternity arrangements. The order's strict prohibition on contact with women reflects medieval attitudes toward gender and sexuality that shaped monastic and military institutions. Understanding these gender dimensions provides a more complete picture of the Templars' place in medieval society. The environmental impact of Templar activities, another recently explored area, reveals their role in medieval landscape transformation. Templar estates often became centers of agricultural innovation, introducing new crops, improving drainage systems, and clearing forests for cultivation. Their mills, fish ponds, and irrigation systems altered local ecosystems. The construction of castles and commanderies required massive extraction of stone and timber. While medieval people lacked modern environmental consciousness, the Templars' large-scale activities had lasting impacts on European landscapes. Some regions still showed traces of Templar land management practices in field patterns and settlement distributions. The Templars' relationship with intellectual and artistic culture deserves more recognition than it typically receives. While not primarily scholars, the order included educated members who contributed to medieval learning. Templar libraries, though most are now lost, contained theological works, practical manuals, and possibly texts acquired in the East. The order's patronage supported artists and craftsmen who decorated their churches and illustrated their manuscripts. Templar architectural innovations influenced the development of Gothic style. Their exposure to Eastern artistic traditions may have introduced new motifs and techniques to European art. This cultural dimension complicates the image of Templars as simple warrior monks. As we conclude this extensive examination of Templar history, it becomes clear that their story cannot be reduced to simple narratives of heroism or villainy, sanctity or corruption. The Templars were complex human beings operating within a complex historical context, capable of both great nobility and ordinary failings. Their institution embodied the contradictions of medieval society, the attempt to reconcile Christianity's peaceful message with the reality of warfare, the tension between monastic poverty and institutional wealth, the challenge of maintaining spiritual ideals while engaging in worldly activities. Their success demonstrated the power of organized dedication to a cause. Their failure revealed the vulnerability of even the mightiest institutions to political manipulation and changing circumstances. The enduring fascination with the Templars suggests that their story touches something deep in human consciousness. Perhaps it is the appeal of absolute dedication to a cause, increasingly rare in our relativistic age. Perhaps it is the drama of their rise and fall, which follows the archetypal pattern of tragedy. Perhaps it is the mysteries that surround them, offering endless scope for imagination and speculation. Or perhaps it is simply that in the Templars we see reflected our own struggles to balance idealism with pragmatism, spirituality with worldly engagement, individual conscience with institutional loyalty. Whatever the source of their appeal, the Knights Templar remain 7 centuries after their suppression a powerful presence in our cultural imagination. The history of the Knights Templar ultimately transcends the specific events of their existence to become a mirror in which successive generations see their own concerns reflected. Medieval chroniclers saw divine judgment or diabolic corruption. Renaissance humanists saw medieval superstition and injustice. Enlightenment philosophers saw victims of tyranny and prejudice. Romantic writers saw mysterious guardians of ancient wisdom. Modern conspiracy theorists see evidence of vast historical plots. Academic historians see a complex institution deserving careful study. Each perspective contains some truth while missing others, and the totality of these viewpoints creates a richer understanding than any single interpretation could provide. In studying the Templars, we study not just a medieval military order, but the entire process by which history becomes memory, memory becomes legend, and legend influences new history. We see how institutions rise and fall, how ideals become corrupted or transformed, how power operates in different historical contexts, and how human beings struggle to find meaning in dedication to causes greater than themselves. The white-mantled knights who patrolled the roads of the Holy Land, managed estates across Europe, and died in flames proclaiming their innocence have achieved a different kind of immortality than they sought. They remain forever present in our cultural consciousness, simultaneously historical figures and mythical archetypes, reminding us of the complexity, tragedy, and grandeur of human endeavor. The complete story of the Knights Templar, from their humble origins through their spectacular rise, their shocking fall, and their extraordinary afterlife in myth and memory, stands as one of history's most compelling narratives. It encompasses themes of faith and power, idealism and corruption, dedication and betrayal, justice and injustice that resonate across centuries and cultures. As long as human beings struggle with questions of meaning, power and justice, the story of the Knights Templar will continue to fascinate, instruct and inspire. Their history reminds us that the past is never truly past, that the actions of men and women centuries ago continue to echo in our present, and that the search for understanding the complexities of human experience remains an endless and rewarding endeavor. In the end, the Templars achieved a form of victory their persecutors could never have imagined. They became immortal in the only realm that ultimately matters, the continuing consciousness of humanity struggling to understand itself and its history.